How can you boost your immune system? Good question. This comes up a lot. I mean, right now the nasties are going around again. I don't know. Sure. It's weird. Yeah. Like we just came out of March. We're in April, and
season's changing. That's when it tends to happen.
Yeah. Yep. So boosting your immune system. I think there's some foundational principles here, and there's probably a few add-ons. Steven, you wanna tackle this one?
Yeah, I would say everybody's mind always jumps to supplements. I feel like that is, especially in the last 5 years, everybody thinks about what supplements can I take to boost my immune system. I would say, number one, you just need to stick to the fundamentals of diet, of exercise, the boring things, so that the system is operating at full capacity. And by proxy or by definition, you will have a stronger immune system. When I think about immune system, though, I think about resilience, and I actually think about exposure and exposure to stressors, things that are called like hormetic stressors, the type of thing that is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Mm-hmm. So that might be a little bit of a left turn from what people may think about when it comes to building a stronger immune system. And it could be as simple as going out into nature frequently. Like somebody who has allergy issues, I know that might be like, that sounds like a nightmare, but exposing yourself to pathogens will allow your body to adapt to them. So I think, again, especially in the last 5 years, where we have individuals going to extreme lengths to avoid exposure to anything by any means possible, you're actually making your immune system weaker. You're actually making your immune system worse. You're doing it a disservice. It's similar to, if you have you have pain while you're doing squats, and so I don't squat ever. Yeah, you're never going to get any stronger at it. So when it comes to boosting your immune system, yeah, you can take the supplements, you can take the zinc, the N-acetylcysteine, the vitamin C, some of these different adaptogenic herbs and things that you hear about. Ashwagandha, rhodiola, all those types of things. But aside from just handling the fundamentals of diet and nutrition and making sure that you're getting in adequate nutrients, adequate calories, all of your your micronutrients, also exercising, doing some type of hormetic stressor like a sauna or a cold plunge, those things can be helpful. And then just getting out and being exposed, frankly, to crowds, to nature, to things that will force your body to adapt and therefore build your immune system.
Love it.
Yeah, I love it too. I think that it's interesting, certainly like during the winter months, people attribute like the seasons are changing, like you said, or the temperature's changing, whatever. And this is the reason I've gotten sick or I got the cold, the head cold or whatever else. I think what people also lose sight of is the different environments they put themselves in. Like they're visiting with family, right? They're going and they're getting quote unquote locked down in a house or a cabin or something for the holidays with the in-laws and the rest of the family that's come from somewhere else. That bring their filthy little children, they're just germ carrying.
Petri dishes.
Yeah, germ carrying or whatever, and everybody's in the same environment, so they're exposed to these new things. They get on airplanes and they're traveling, they're in airports and stuff like that. Look, we live on a planet and we live in a world where you're going to get sick. Like things are going to happen.
Yeah.
But the exposure piece, I think, is important. I think people take that, they don't account for that, one, in exposing yourself pre any of this stuff, and then what they've actually been exposed to, in these acute situations, the travel and the things that happen. And other things that happen with that are usually your sleep patterns get disrupted. Usually your exercise pattern
I didn't mention the sleep component. That's another fundamental that you can't forget about.
Yeah, that's when your nutrition, structure kind of gets broken down a little bit. All of those things are contributing factors.
Yeah, I was going to say, when there's the change of seasons, there's also sometimes, a change in what's happening within your life. So, for some individuals, it's like there's a de-stress period. So like you're working, and you're at this capacity where there's so much stress. And then when your system down regulates, and if you haven't been exposing yourself to certain types of, environments and those types of things, then your body all of a sudden becomes sick.
Yep.
So, and it gets tired, and then it's an opportunity for your body to recover. So I think there's also something to be said as far as, in the change of seasons or in the change of seasons of life as far as what's happening.
Yeah, the exposure piece, there's actually been a lot of studies done on this. I got into this for a little while because I thought it was fascinating, particularly on immune systems and the gut biome, but also the natural biome that exists on our body, skin, on our skin and things like that. So a couple things. One, there was a study that was done with kids that grew up on farms, right, and versus kids that grew up in the city or like more of a rural environment, like a suburban environment. And the kids that grew up on farms and around livestock and were out in, the fields, right, or out in nature and the environment with the pollens and all the things that existed there, had healthier immune systems as they got older. And maybe they got sick a few times when they were a kid or whatever, but those are building antibodies and building a resistance to a lot of that stuff when they were kids. But as they get older, there's a less propensity for that. And obviously, health outcomes there are largely dependent on what your state of health is, right? If you're overweight, you don't exercise, you eat like an asshole, all those things, those are contributing factors too. But that was an interesting one. The other one, not to be too graphic, and that is there's a huge camp where during childbirth, so versus cesarean versus vaginal births. And so there are doctors out there, there are physicians out there that will, when you go through the vaginal canal through birth, you are exposed to all of mom's microbiome beyond what you were already exposed to, right? And so that happens on the outside of the skin. It gets around your mouth, it gets around your eyes, it gets around your nose, it goes onto your skin. And that helps start to form the microbiome that your body will now be living with, which has a lot to do with your immune system and how your body deals with different things. And so if you were born cesarean, you didn't get that, right? So what they actually do is they actually swab mom and they'll rub that all over baby, nose, mouth, eyes, skin, whatever, just to expose them to that bacteria that exists there, and that basically that biome, so that the baby is getting that. And there are studies that show that those babies tend to have a better immune system over the longer period of time. Last thing I'll say about this, just a personal anecdote, is like my oldest, when she was like in her first year of life, dude, she was sick all the time, but she was also being exposed to a lot of things. Within the first year, she was already like in a daycare situation. It was like another mom who had another child that was about the same age. They had dogs and cats, and they had an outside area where they had, some chickens and stuff like that. And so it was a different environment than what we lived in. And she got sick quite frequently. There was a lot of upper respiratory stuff that she seemed to have. It was a real bummer. It was like, damn, this kid's miserable, right? Like, not miserable to me, but miserable. She's always got green shit coming out of her mouth and, or out of her nose, and she's coughing and sneezing, and maybe she's got a fever or whatever else. That was very stressful for me as a parent, because not that I thought she was going to die or anything, terrible was going to happen to her, just that I hated seeing my kid sick, right? And I also hated having to take time off work and, not be able to take her to the daycare when she was sick, and that's inconvenient. And I think a lot of parents, early on, they're like, they want to protect their kids from that. So they don't want to put them in those environments. And then when those things do happen and it becomes to, kind of impact life, and work and the things, and that's tough, kids up sick, they're up all night, they're miserable. And that means parents are up all night and they're having to deal with that. They start to kind of retract and don't want to expose their kids to stuff. I can tell you this, that kid was sick a lot in year one. Never got sick after that. Never. I mean, the occasional cold or flu, but never like anything gnarly. And even to this day, rarely gets sick as a young adult. So again, that's anecdotal, but the point being there is, I think, as you're approaching things, for your own immune system, think about the exposures that you are or aren't getting. Don't reach for a pill, a tablet, a capsule, or whatever else. However, there are things that, have some promising, research around them in terms of what to do. But once you're sick, right? So, once that immune system has been compromised, the main things that you can do are making sure you're eating right? You're hydrating correctly. You may be onboarding a few extra things. We've talked about that on the show before, and you're getting plenty of sleep, right? And you're just allowing your body to fight through it. That's a natural part of being a human being. So the real answer to that is get those exposures, right? And stay healthy, right? Exercise, eat right, sleep right, do those basic things. Yeah, just stress management. That'll usually keep you in a good spot. I mean, if you just think about your friends, those that are more physically fit, that pay closer attention to the things that we just talked about, are they sick more or less than your friends that don't? I know what that answer is for me. Think about that.